All right. Thanks for coming, guys, to a different meeting location this week. Our special topic, which we're having actually before the group meeting today, is going to be on wiki accountability. I know that with our moving data over to OSO Wiki, there's been a lot of questions as to why can we trust this data, and how are we going to be able to verify we have the most current and most accurate data. EVA has put together a pitch that they've shown a few times before, and so I'm going to leave it over to James and Darren and Costa to get that presentation.
All right, hi everybody. I'm Darren Welsh, James Montalvo, and Costa Mavridis here today. As Chris said, we've given this presentation several times now to different audiences, and one of the first questions that comes up when people hear the word wiki is, well, how can we trust this? They think of a wiki as anybody can go edit this information, and all of a sudden there's all these questions of accountability. We have really important information here for the jobs that we do, so how can we trust that? This is the same presentation we've given at the FOIG, and we've given it to our CX management as well. So about 4.5 years ago, we really got to talking about how frustrating it was to do our jobs. You know, we have lesson plans, and we have documents out on the S drive, we have information on SharePoint sites, and we have all these different sources of information, even on people's hard drives. And between these different documents, you'd have maybe a Rev Alpha and a Rev Bravo, but maybe Rev Alpha has a more recent timestamp than Rev Bravo, and then maybe you have another file that says, you know, Rev someone's name, and you're trying to figure out, well, which one do I trust, and which one actually has the most current information. So we started trying to figure out how can we solve this problem, and over the past 4 years, we think we found a pretty solid solution. So let's start talking about the word wiki. What does it actually mean? Wiki is a pretty generic term. It basically means a website that's easily editable by anybody in a community. They can edit the content and the structure. So SharePoint has a wiki, and we all have SharePoint available to us. So why don't we just use the SharePoint wiki, or why don't we use some of the other wikis that are available at NASA, like Confluence or TWiki? Well, over the years we've developed this Mediawiki system that we believe is the most accountable system out there. We can actually measure the accountability of our content. With our system, we're able to integrate to things like Imagery Online, IMS, and other existing databases, and we can tie our information together with the context that we need to figure out which information is important to us. So rather than just some standard search tool that pulls up a list of 50 documents that might be relevant, with the wiki we can put some context in there and make it a little bit more sensical when you're trying to find information for a class or for something on console. Another thing that is really powerful, and it took us a couple of years to figure out what this really meant, is semantic relationships. So with stock Mediawiki, it's mostly just text and pictures, but with some of the extensions and the add-ons that we've developed and that we've added on from other sources, we can actually add database relationships between items in the wiki. And we'll show you what that means a little bit later. But this is a feature that, as far as we can see, no other wiki solution has available. So think back a few years before we had the wiki. We had the console handbook. That was sort of kind of your collective knowledge. It was sort of your wiki before we had a wiki. And so with the wiki now, we're trying to make it where it's easily editable by anyone, and the review process can be sped up. It can be, the information can be more current than with our old console handbooks. But our wiki is not just about console materials. We've got a wiki page for the suit, for the EMU, and we've got pages for each of the components, and we show the relationships between those components. We've got pages for each of our lesson plans. Those lesson plans use information from the hardware pages, so that the information is stored in one place, but it's used in multiple ways. We've got pages for all the ORUs that we deal with. So, and then we've got pages for our EVAs. And these pages, and we'll show you a little bit later an example of how they start off as a planning page. We start planning a mission that's in the future, and we start putting products on there, and then eventually it evolves into a historical archive. So let's back up and talk about that console handbook. Let's talk about some of our traditional documents and how we revise those documents and how we maintain the information in those. Traditionally, most systems have this kind of a setup where we have an edit, alert, review loop. So a document's out there, you find some information in there that's outdated, or maybe you want to add something new, so you go and edit that document, right? Then an alert is sent out. Maybe it's an email, maybe you walk down the hall and tell your buddy, hey, I need you to review this document, and then the review process starts. And ideally, you keep doing that cycle, and the document stays up to date, and you have all the current information. But in practice, what we really see is that review cycle really stretches out. And there's a lot of reasons. We don't want to point fingers, but sometimes you've got one person that's out on vacation. Sometimes you've got high priority tasks that you're working, and you have to put this stuff aside for a while. Sometimes an important mission comes up, and you've got to react and help the crew out. But when this happens, you've got a bunch of users or a bunch of people in your group that may have already completed the review of that document, but you can't make any more revisions because you're waiting for that last person to come back from their trip, to finish their other task, whatever it is. You're stuck here waiting for everybody to complete their review to say that that document is published. And furthermore, what makes this even worse is that you might have some better information that 9 out of 10 people agree is correct, but you can't publish it and put it out there and let other people use it until that last person comes back and says, yes, I agree. So you might have stale information for months on end. Well, our approach with the wiki is to really embrace crowdsourcing. So instead of blocking that publication, we take kind of the opposite approach. If someone wants to update a wiki page, they can do so, and that update is immediately made visible to everybody that goes to the wiki page. And you might say, well, hold on, that's bad. What if someone puts something wrong on there? Well, you've got a lot of people reviewing those pages. And like I showed you on the previous slide there, you might have 9, 10 people watching that page. And with the Wiki way, we're counting on the majority of those people reviewing that content very quickly. And yeah, we might have to wait for one person to come back, but we can continue adding more information or correcting other information that's still outdated while that person is out. And when they come back, they can easily see the sum of all the changes, and they can go through line by line and make sure that everything is correct, that they agree with what all those other people said was correct. So let's kind of walk through an example of what does this actually look like in the wiki. So at the top of every page, you've got a page title and the page, and you've got some headers up here. You can click on edit to edit it. But this star up here is a link. And if I were to click on that star, I would watch the International Space Station page. And what that means is that that page is important to me. I want to be notified anytime someone revises that page. So let's say I watch the International Space Station page, and then let's say Costa goes and makes some changes to it. Well, I'm going to be notified of those changes. I can click on my pending reviews, and I'll go to this special page here. And this page is arranged to show which pages have been changed since I last went to the wiki. And it groups them by page, and it shows just a summary of what those changes are. And it actually ranks them in a priority order based on how many other people have reviewed those pages. So this group meeting, there's probably no one has seen a change to that yet, whereas the yellow one, maybe 1 or 2 people have seen those changes, but it's still maybe not 100% trustworthy. We need to get a couple more people to look at it. And here we've got maybe 5 or 6 people have already seen those changes, so it's okay if I get to that one a little bit later. So let's go ahead and click on that green button and see what changed on the International Space Station page. Actually, this is a different page, but for the purpose of the demonstration, anytime you click on that green button, you're going to be shown the before and the after. So here I can see the last revision I saw was last revised back in January of 2015. And then here, this user, Kay Eversley, so Karina Eversley in the EVA group, she added this paragraph right here. So this system really relies on having our people, the people in our group, in our community, watching pages so that they can review each of those changes as they come in. And so to encourage our users to watch pages, we started trying to show people, hey, here's some pages that you might be interested in watching. Because maybe at first they just didn't know, well, what is it that I should be responsible for? What should I watch? And so we came up with this watch suggestions. And it's kind of like Amazon. You know, you go to Amazon and you buy a beach towel and some flip-flops, and it suggests, well, hey, you might want some sunscreen too, right? So James put in this cool algorithm that figures out, you know, if you're watching certain pages, you might also be interested in these other pages over here. And we actually overheard a conversation in the hallway where a couple of people were talking about this, and they were kind of motivated by this leaderboard down here that shows how many pages each person is watching. And they were getting in a little bit of competition, saying, well, I'm going to watch more pages than my manager is, and you know, we'll see what happens there. And the other person said, yeah, but it says I should watch ISS OCAD 9252. Why do I care about that? And the other person says, well, actually, that OCAD is about hardware that you're a SME for, so you should probably watch it. So the system works, and we've actually seen good results from it. So I said earlier that we have measurable accountability. With our system, we can actually hold our data accountable. So let's talk a little bit more about what we mean by that. So we talked about the watch suggestions, right? Here's some data to show how that worked. Up at the top, we've got a blue line, the total number of pages in our wiki over time. So as time goes on, we get more and more content. We need people to be watching those pages. And at first, we noticed on this orange line, a lot of pages were only being watched by one person. Well, that's probably the person that created the page, and that's no good because they might have just put something on there that they didn't really know what they're talking about. We want other people to review that and make sure that it's correct. After we added watch suggestions, there was a noticeable change in behavior. So we have a lot of other data. This is just one other example. It's kind of a crazy chart, so let me walk you through it. So around the perimeter, these dots are people, and all of the blue dots that are out here, here, and then throughout, those are pages. And what we're showing here is the relationship in our wiki between people and pages that they're watching. So for example, this person probably created a bunch of pages. I don't know if that was maybe our person that's in charge of OCADs, so they may have created a bunch of OCAD pages, or you know, maybe they were working on some project that no one else is working on yet. And this shows us that there's a bunch of pages that we need more people watching those because they're isolated. If pages are in the middle here, that's a good thing. We've got a lot of people watching them. But you notice that there's some red. Some of the lines are gray, some are red. Well, we can actually measure which pages, the ones that are indicated by the red lines, those are pages where the user has not seen the most recent revision of that page. And that tells us that they're not going to their pending reviews and checking those updates that have been made. So for the first time now, anybody that's interested in the knowledge of the group, whether it's management or just someone that really wants to make sure that their documentation is good, can go and get a summary of the state of their knowledge capture. So what about reliability? You know, what if someone goes in there and just wants to wipe something out, or they want to put something malicious in there? You know, how can we protect against that? Well, for every page in the wiki, every single revision is retained. Every change has a timestamp, tells you who did it, and sometimes has a summary if the person puts a summary there. You can easily compare the versions of the page. Let's say Costa goes in there, he just gets really upset one day and he wants to delete a page or put something in really rude in there about James. Well, we can easily go back and revert that. It's not a problem. Now, this is a big culture change. We realize we're trying to convince people that it's better to put information out and continually review it versus holding it back and reviewing it thoroughly before publishing it. So with this, we understand that there still are some special cases where we need that additional layer of review before we release a version. So we still have, we do have a way to address that. So like lesson plans, take lesson plans for example. Here's a safer intro lesson. Our lesson plans have what we call approved revs, approved revisions. And so if James was to go in and add some comments to this lesson, like you saw on the previous slide with the history, those changes won't show up until the manager or an admin or the lesson plan owner approve those changes. So this is a kind of a special case where we said, okay, we really do want to lock this down and make it where only anybody can go and edit the page, anybody can go add new information or modify things, but those changes won't immediately become visible until the subject matter expert says, yeah, I agree with that. All right, so let's switch over to the EVA Wiki, and we'll go through a few pages just to show some of the other features that I mentioned earlier. So we're going to go to the See to Cart page. That's one of our best demo pages. So we model after Wikipedia very much. We try to have some encyclopedia overview information. A lot of pages will have an info box that has some pictures and some basic information about the hardware. So we have the part number, we have links off to IMS certification documents, drawings, CMC imagery. These are all good sources of information, and we don't want to repeat what they do. We just want to tie in with them and make it easier for our users to go get that information at a moment's notice. We can easily see when we're missing information. We don't have the length, width, and height, but now we know that we're missing that info, and it tells us, hey, we should probably go find that information so that if we need it, it's readily available. We list who our subject matter experts are, and then we have a lot of sections just with information about, you know, the features of the See to Cart. We have some pictures to help describe, you know, what you can do with it. We reference different operational constraints, and we use citations back to the source documentation to back up our claims. So I keep going down. Got a lot of videos and pictures. So here's our reference section. And this is what we're trying to encourage people to do more is, you know, previously we had lesson plans that said, you know, thou shalt not use this tool in such a manner. And it's like, well, based on what? And we're trying to get people to more and more cite the OCAD or the procedure or the flight rule that says, yeah, really, you need to follow this restraint or this constraint. And then down at the bottom of every page, we have this footer, and this automatically gets populated based on content on other pages. So this is actually not written on the See to Cart page. We take meeting minutes, every meeting that we go to, we put those into a simple form and save those off. But if that meeting happened to discuss the See to Cart, we tag it as a relevant article, a related article, and then the summary, the synopsis of that meeting will automatically show up in the footer of the See to Cart page. So here's a meeting tools CR call, and looks like James was the one that went to the meeting. He took good notes, and he said, hey, we're talking about this long duration tie down tether, using it to tie down the brake handles, and here's what was discussed, and he's going to tag it as related to the See to Cart. And that way, months down the road, when you're like, oh man, I know we talked about this, but I can't remember when and where, you go to the See to Cart page and scroll down to the bottom, and you can find that information quickly. Let's go back to the footer. We have information about manifest items that are going up and down on vehicles. We have EVA references. So US EVA 34, that was the EVA where we had to go out and release the brakes on the See to Cart. So the US EVA 34 page you know, it has some information about what the EVA was about, how long it was when it started, who the crew were, who some of the MCC personnel were. And then here, because we tagged it, Cedicart, as a significant ORU or tool, because we tagged it as a related article, it automatically populates back on the Cedicart page for us. We don't have to do that work. We just do it here once. So these are the semantic relationships that I mentioned earlier. Why don't we go to the animation? So that US EVA 34 was kind of a quick turnaround response once Robo realized what we had done with the breaks. And this page, as I said, we started off as a development page, kind of building our information, and then it became a real-time documentation of our EVA. And this just shows how the page grew over 4 days. And you can see, you know, each person went in there and added some more pictures, added some more information. We documented who the crew were that were going to do the EVA, who the mission ops personnel were. We put the start time and duration once the EVA started, and it turned into a historical archive now with all of our procedures linked from there. So it just shows how easy it is for everyone in the group to contribute to the page, and there's one single portal to go find that information that's relevant for that quick turnaround operation. So we've been doing this for about 4.5 years. A lot of groups have taken interest to it. This shows kind of our splash page showing all the different wikis that we have out there right now. We have one that we call an open access wiki for all of FOD. That's anybody with NDC credentials can see that information. So it's like how to set up your printer, how to use Fox, that kind of general information. And then we have a bunch of wikis for various groups within FOD, including BME, technically not FOD, I guess, but they work in MCC. And so we've got OSO right here. Robo is an interesting case. They were kind of the second group to come on board. They were using SharePoint Wiki heavily, and James found a way to automate the conversion from SharePoint over to Mediawiki. So basically they had the same exact content, but now they had all these additional features that we have. So if you're interested in hearing about a SharePoint conversion, you can talk to the Robos and get their view on that. Something kind of thinking towards the future is we're talking about, well, as we grow the number of wikis, you know, do we really want to have all these different groups segregated, or would it make sense for us to consolidate some of our info? You know, between EVA and Robo and OSO, we have a lot of shared information. Maybe we should consolidate that into a single resource and help each other out. So we haven't really figured that out yet, but it's definitely on our radar. So that's kind of the end of our presentation. We'll take questions, and we can definitely dive into the wiki and do some more in-depth demonstration if you want.
What happens if 2 people are editing at the same time?
Good question. So he's asking what happens if 2 people try to edit the same page. Pages are broken up into different sections, and there is a tool built in that, let's say James is editing the training mockup section and Costa is editing the MT Rescue EVA section at the same time. It won't have a conflict if you're doing different sections. Now, if we both try to edit the same exact section at the same time, then basically whoever's first kind of wins, and then the second person will be notified, hey, someone snuck in there and made a revision while you were also trying to edit, and you have to, as a human, go in and interpret, okay, how do I want to resolve this?
It tries to seamlessly merge it. If the computer can look at it and say, can I put these 2 things together? If you both try to edit the same exact part, then it doesn't know who should win. So you have to make a determination on who should win.
So I was playing around with this stuff yesterday, looking at the watch list and watch pages and all that stuff. And I noticed that some of my options were not to watch a particular page, but actually watch a person. How is that?
That's because a person is a page.
Okay.
Yeah. It's probably because because it's trying to suggest based on what you're currently watching. So if you were already watching your own page because you had edited it, then then it's giving you similar pages, and another person would be similar because you were watching your own person. It should get better as you watch more pages.
It's a concept to bring up is that everything on the wiki is a page. So if you have your own user page, that's a page, and everyone else's as well.
So this is kind of interesting for management or other people trying to figure out, well, who's working on what, and maybe I can tie in with someone that can help me out. We have our person template set up where it automatically shows which missions I have worked or I'm working on. So it just pulls those in from the other mission pages. And then
This is not written on Darren's page. This is written on each of the mission pages and pulled in automatically.
Yeah, so if you go to the Expedition 24 page, I am listed as EVA task for that expedition, and then on my user page it has a query that automatically pulls that data in.
So it's not so much stalking as it is just harmlessly watching it.
Yeah, and for the watch suggestions feature, we certainly would like to do a little bit of tweaking on the algorithm on what should be suggested, because to some degree people look at that and say, well, I don't want to be suggested 10 different people in our group to watch. Like, it's not something, on the one hand, it doesn't really matter. There's not a lot of changes to those pages, so if I watch it, it doesn't add to my workload by any means. But people kind of have an aversion to be like, I don't want to be watching everybody else's pages. And so that's kind of understandable. Similarly, things like meeting minutes, they really shouldn't change very much. They don't really need lots of watchers, so putting those in our list of suggestions are the kind of things where we might want to tweak the algorithm and be able to say, downplay the need for watching people pages and meeting minutes pages. And if we had more funding, we'd put more into the algorithm, but at the moment, our funding is low, more than zero.
In that specific example, though, the one thing that is useful is all of our crew are also people pages. So there might be a case that you do want to watch some people, like your crew, if you're assigned to a crew member. So we do use that. We've been documenting a lot of their unique features for EVA style of, hey, this crew member likes things on this side or that side. So in those cases, I do want it to suggest crew members. But for right now, the crew member and employees are the same template, same form of a person. So.
Do you have any permissions, special permissions for your crew pages?
So the concept of the wiki does not support permissions as such, or not easily. So if you have access to the wiki, you have access to the wiki.
So we have viewers and contributors. For the most part, contributors are our group plus some people outside of our group that we've given permission. We're becoming more open to allowing more contributors because we have a pretty wide base of people that are watching at this point, so we're more willing to have more contributors, but we're not really concerned about.
So if we wanted to have restricted pages, like what we have now for our training flows, when people move from instructor to controller, from controller to instructor, you don't necessarily want the students to have access to the lesson plans and what the scripts are and stuff like that. So the thing to do with that would be then to link that, the material you don't want them to see, it'd be linked from the wiki, but it wouldn't be part of the wiki.
So at present, our wiki system does not have a method to say this page is viewable by one group and this page is viewable by another group. We haven't attempted to support that, and we're not sure we want to go down that road for several reasons that we can get into it in a moment. But from a purely technical standpoint, it would be possible for us to enable that feature, but not necessarily in a way that we are 100% sure that it's bulletproof for the sake of protecting data from people that really should not be allowed to see it. Not somebody that's in a training flow, but somebody that is a foreign national that shouldn't be able to see some information.
And I can give you some examples. It really comes down to examples. The wiki's not going to be able to fix every single idea you have, but one example we use is our knowledge gates. So they're kind of the aura boards other groups give. So on our wiki, we have the study guide, which is just the questions. The answers we do at the current moment keep on the S drive and locked down. So there are cases where we still using USB drive or some other form.
I think as we expand, we're going to be addressing some of those. Some of them we may decide to be less restrictive with the caveat that people should, we could have a certain expectation that people aren't doing something. And some of them may go that other way of going onto the S drive or somewhere.
So if you've
or
got
still on
something,
SharePoint.
some sort of setup like that within your wiki, do you have some sort of like notation that says, you know, that this is the workbook for students, but you know, instructors can reference, you know, such and such on restricted.
Right, so the great thing about the
access
wiki
database.
is that anybody can do that. So if it wasn't there, you could easily go to that page and add that little note on top. So we don't have that generically on there on our specific knowledge gate pages, but I could easily go within 20 seconds and add it right now if I really thought that was useful. So that's kind of the beauty of the wiki, that I don't have to go, you know, wait for somebody to agree and approve it. I can go ahead and do it. And, you know, 4 or 5 of us are watching this page and we all think, yeah, that is a good idea. That's a good note to have to point the instructor to the S drive. So currently we do not have it, but if you think it's useful, you add it yourself. It's pretty straightforward.
And that concept is another sort of change in mentality of not necessarily asking permission for something that isn't, you know, if you're concerned about whether or not you're accurate on something, certainly go ask people. But if it's purely just well, I think there should be a link to this, there's nothing inaccurate about that. And Costa should feel free to go out and make that change and not feel like he has to go and ask people. For the first couple of years of using our wiki, people would say, well, hey, can I change that page, or will you change that page for me? And we had to keep reiterating, just go do it. You know, it's fine, go make that change. And if people disagree with it, they will either change it back or come to your office and say, well, I don't think we should be linking to that content, or I don't think we should make it look this way, or whatever, and they'll talk to you there, or we'll go to the discussion page and have discussions there, that sort of thing.
One concept I'm trying to put out there more and more is the thought of transparency. You know, rather than hiding our information and trying to make sure it's 100% correct, I would much rather put my information out there and get as many people to review it as possible, because hopefully they're going to catch what's wrong before something bad happens because I have wrong information. So the more people that are reading my information and hopefully contributing to it, and if they don't feel comfortable actually making the change, as James said, they can go to the discussion page and say, hey, Darren, I think you're wrong on this page. We should talk about it and maybe update that page. I want that kind of conversation, and the wiki helps facilitate that.
Is that information, if you have that conversation on the discussion page, that kind of documents that sort of stuff there? Or
So we've had cases, I can tell you, I made a wiki page on a component, and somebody went and changed a description of how something works, and I disagreed. And on our discussion page, we had a back and forth, 3 or 4 paragraphs of, well, actually, I think it's this way, that way. What I went ahead and did is on the main page, we can flag it and say, this is for discussion. This is currently under
discussion review or something like that.
It's contentious. There's different opinions. Go see the discussion page for the back and forth. So we can easily tag those and show people that, hey, before you trust this, go ahead and read the discussion page to see what people are saying about it. So we have built in these little syntaxes that you can easily add to notify these things. We also have something called the clarification notification. So if something's confusing and you don't necessarily know how to reword it to make it more easily understood, you can just tag it as this needs clarification. So that'll get populated in the page where somebody who actually knows that content can easily go clarify it. We do the same thing for citations. If we see something that we're not 100% trusting, I can tag it as this needs a citation, please add a citation. So we do have these little features we can add to kind of handle some of these points there.
So if somebody makes an edit to a page, and before any of the watchers on that page get to review it and, I guess, approve it, does it show up in any way to say, needs review, or this is new content that was just added that hasn't been checked?
So we just recently added, James here can talk about it since he developed it, or Darren.
Go ahead. So we don't get a banner at the top that says this is unreviewed or anything, but what we do have is these 2 scores at the top, and it's another thing that we're kind of developing and trying to figure out how to make it work best for the users. But it tells you how many people have reviewed the page. It's showing it here as kind of a yellowish color, meaning 3 people have reviewed the page is good. We'd like more. And then also scrutiny. I'll talk about scrutiny in a minute. If we go over to Darren page, it's the same. Seat of cart will be higher. Oh. So seat of cart, 13 people have reviewed this page. It's green. You can feel pretty confident that that the content is well vetted. So that's just how many people have seen the latest version of this page. Scrutiny is kind of looking at the people that are watching this page, how good are they at watching it? So how quickly do they get to the reviews? So if I were to make a change right now, how long would it take to get to the point where it would be well reviewed? So if we look over here, it's not being scrutinized as much as over here. That's definitely still kind of something in development to really look at how long people take, and then not just necessarily length of time for somebody to take a review, but is this person, do we really trust this person is doing a good job of reviewing? Are they going to the page and saying, yep, that's good, and I'm out, without actually having scrolled down? That would be something we would want to take away from their kind of scrutiny score versus...
What exactly does that scrutiny score tell me? Like you had the one there that had 2.1, this is 8.8, it's like, is 8.8 good?
So I'd say green is good, red is bad. So the numbers, we're still toying with what they mean and how to kind of tweak them, but higher is better, basically.
And sort of what we're saying is we're measuring how people review versus previously we would put it through a review cycle, say see our workflow, right? And you assume everybody in that list actually reads everything. You don't know that they did. If they put a comment, they probably did, but I've had people put comments and they didn't make any sense, and I'm like, well, did you actually read it? So it's not, no review process is going to be so bulletproof where you actually watched the person review it and made sure that it is thoroughly reviewed. So we still say trust but verify. We still say please cite the source documentation, whether it's a card or an OCAD or a drawing or a flight rule. We still trust those source documentations and try to tie everything back to those.
So when you say someone's reviewed a page, does it mean they've gone to the page and clicked, okay, I agree with this, or does it mean they've just gone to the page?
At present, it means they've gone to the page. When you go to the page after you've been watching it and it's been changed, right? So I go to the page, first time I go and view the page, I click watch this page, right? I've seen it now. Then Darren goes and edits it. The next time I go to the page, or if I go up to my reviews up here and see that it's been changed and click on it, when I go to that page, it gives me a notification saying, you are stating that you've reviewed this page now. If you would like to not state that at the moment, you can click defer review.
So if you make it halfway through and want to remind yourself.
Yeah. So we kind of have an implicit review process at the moment. We do want to at least have the ability to change that so that you actually have to turn around and say, yes, I review this. It's kind of piggybacking right now on the way Mediawiki works by default, which is that implicit review. For kind of our enterprise use case, we might want to change it the other direction. We at least want to have the ability to, so we can just switch, flip a switch and choose which way works for us.
I think this is a good segue also to kind of point out why we're using Mediawiki and the benefits of it is, so maybe we can get this stuff on a SharePoint wiki, but you'd have to ask SharePoint, hey, can you please create this new feature? Can you please develop this new idea? And you have to wait on that process. The great thing about using Mediawiki is this is the same software Wikipedia is using with millions of users throughout the world. So any kind of feature that somebody develops for Wikipedia, we can easily go look at and see like, hey, this guy created or this person created this feature. We think it might be useful in our FOD world. Let's see if we can integrate it. And we can easily pull that information and try it out. We can also tweak things ourselves. We've been collaborating with other companies throughout Houston, oil and gas, Jacobs. They also are using different forms of wiki, and we've created a collaboration with them to see what kind of features we can use with each other. So that is another benefit here of instead of relying on a third-party source that you're going to have to wait and do contracts and kind of delay that process of getting features added, we've created a wiki community here. We have admins in every group that you guys talk to them multiple times a day and are actively, trying to come up with new ideas and new features, and you're not relying on kind of a single source.
Question I have is about that console reference. Like right now, the console handbook volume 4 we have, it goes through that long review process. Like it takes forever, but it's locked down, and that's the document I can cite to a flight director on a console. Whereas just a cheat sheet that I built as a hip pocket, I'm technically not allowed to reference that as a. This seems more like, a cheat sheet so 4 or 5 people might have reviewed it, but so how are we getting on the NASA rules of citing it as a console documentation?
Well, it kind of comes down to culture shift. I mean, we're trying to teach people and show people that. I mean, I can't pull up a specific example now, but every time we bring up console handbook, people say, "Oh yeah, I know there's parts of it that are out of date, that are no longer true, but it's published." So, why do we say we can trust it just because it's published? Because we know that there's fallacies in it. So, we're just trying to show that, yeah, someone might put something wrong in the wiki, but at least we can track it down and we can see when it changed and who made the change and if they cited some other documentation. There's a lot more connectivity. There's a lot more chance for it to be reviewed and updated. We actually have our console handbooks and work instructions in the wiki, and we link from the master list to the wiki. We're still kind of evolving, so our console handbook, it has pages in there about the different components in the airlock. So, do we really want to lock down every single one of those pages? We're still talking about that. I think the answer is no, but we have some others that disagree.
And the way we've gotten our management to buy off on it right now is, for example, our console handbook is in that kind of second feature that Darren talked about the revision control page. So this is one of those specific pages that it's only going to display what's published. And so in that case, it matches what our hard copy console handbook is doing, as far as you can technically only use what's approved by the SME or the management in this case. So we have transitioned our console handbook into the wiki and made it revision controlled. So so the one feature about this, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is that you do have this little sentence up here that says you can see the most recent version. This is the approved version. That's kind of our caveat, where you can still go and see what other people have edited, and then you have to make the real-time call of, am I going to make a flight controller, call on this? You have to explain that to your flight director and say, technically the published version says that temperature limit is 15, but we have some pretty smart SMEs that said it's different.
Yeah, I bring up the question not to push back or say I don't like it. It's just that it's that culture shift that you're going to have to get, especially folks who've been doing this for so long in the old way, to be comfortable citing something that for years we've said you can't cite anything that wasn't an official doc.
Yeah, we're still working on it actively.
And if you look, they've got a big yellow box saying "Don't trust this." or "Don't use it during a mission."
And this specifically is a lesson plan. It's not the console handbook. So lesson plans sometimes do things in contrived manners just because for the purpose of teaching, not for saying how we would execute in a mission. So that's kind of what that box means. But
so EVA's been pushing all this for. They've been working on a lot of this for a while. We're working in, talking in amongst ourselves as well, and I'm sure there will be more discussions as we start to moving to using some of this more.
Well, and hopefully, you get to a point with a console handbook type entry where you've got something that says, hey, per this source, I have this information, and when you put that in there, even if it's under review, you still know from this source I have this.
You can immediately link back to the original source and put that instead.
So it does, it should be that way.
So, like I said, I like it. We'll have to make the shift.
It is a culture shift.
Yeah.
Which is part of what this meeting hopefully today was to show you how we can, why we have some confidence and why we can trust data.
So I want to just go into a little more detail on the approved revs. From the presentation that we gave you was what we did at the FOIG, and we had 10 minutes, so we had to go quickly. So with the approved revs here, which again we try to keep it as a minimal number of pages that we have approved revs on, because it does increase the amount of time and it increases the kind of the friction of getting good information into the wiki. And we've got 5,000, 6,000 pages on the EVA wiki content pages with lots of content on them. So, you know, keeping that number that has more friction is good, or keeping that number lower rather. Anyway, as we pointed out, we've got the page here. It says that it's revision controlled. I'm a approver on this, as is Art, and managers and sysop or admin can do it as well. It says it's the approved revision of the page. It's not the most recent. I could click on this and it'll bring it to the most recent version. I also can go up into view history here and I can see, okay, this is the approved revision. So in this history list of everything that's been done ever on this page, I was the last person to make an edit in February, and I probably approved my own edit, which is something we may want to change, make it so you can approve your own. So Art would have to go approve mine, for example. But then since then, a couple other people have made edits that are pending approval. So this is what you're seeing. This is what is actually done. So Alex was able to go make an edit, and then a few days later, Glenda was able to make an edit on top of that. So it still is not freezing that edit process. That edit process can continue to go and move along. And then when I get my act together and come around and actually go to look at what's happened, I can go and see, okay, I'm going to click on the latest revision, and I'm going to click on the one that I approved a while ago, and I'm going to compare selected revisions. And I can see this is all the stuff that was added, whether it's one revision or 80 revisions in between. I can see kind of sum of all changes between the approved and the kind of head revision. And I can just go ahead and approve it, or I can go make some edits to it and say, well, that's not actually 100% right. I need to make this tweak here, make my own edit on top of it, and then approve that edit. Continue from there.
Just to kind of expand on what you were saying a few minutes ago about you know, the kind of trusting this for console type discussions, you know, real-time important calls. You know, it's just like any other source. You want to not have one source of information. You want to kind of verify with other sources. And one thing that we've started doing as we've added more and more information into the wiki, you know, I'm the representative in charge of our EVA inhibit pad and our notes, cautions, and warnings. And we have other people that put all the OCADs in there, and we add rationale behind the OCADs to help us understand better what it is we're trying to accomplish there. And then of course we have flight rules, right? And then we have, and OCADs have to be implemented either in a flight rule and or via training and or via procedures. And so all of this stuff is kind of interlinked. And by putting a lot of this information into the wiki, we can now run a query and say, well, give me all of those products that are related to a PUP module or that are related to the lab. And those kind of queries have actually helped our mission planners to identify some of the hazard controls that they should have had in their procedures that they otherwise might have missed when they were just going through the list one by one and deleting the ones that they thought didn't apply. And we've also even found issues with flight rules that are out there that need to be revised, and you know, someone in our group noticed that these flight rules didn't match these inhibits in our inhibit pad, and they were looking at the OCADs and some of the other documents trying to tie it together, and we had discrepancies there. And it turns out, I'm 90% sure, that the flight rules are actually the part that are incorrect, so we're going to go around and try to get those flight rules updated. But we wouldn't have known if we hadn't tied everything together so neatly so that we can make those connections. So it's kind of that exposing that information and making it more transparent and tied together. Any more questions?
Got one other thing I just wanted to mention, just for my own sake. This is me up here, and this whole time it's been saying 13 reviews, oldest 20 days. One, this is a development server, so it's not my fault. Two, you know, we made this big, bold text when it gets beyond a certain number of days old, and it shakes at you. In an attempt to try to make people aware of it, and we knew a lot of people in our group were using our wiki for the sake of getting content, right, doing their job. but it's important for people to be able to give back to it too and make sure that they're reviewing the things that they're watching. So we're trying to make it real obvious that here's stuff that the wiki wants you to review. So we've it's been a delicate balance the whole time of trying to encourage people to, okay, yes, use the wiki, but also give back to it without pushing too hard. So some people get angry at that shaking pending reviews. So if you're one of those people, I apologize for shaking your reviews at you. We also always willing to take feedback. So if there's something that's annoying or you think is offensively shaking at you, we're all ears.
The other thing I would just want to point out about culture shift is, one thing we struggled with, and this is, in any industry, is the growth of the content. So with you guys starting your wiki here, Chris and Amanda have been doing a lot of work on it, but you're not going to start on the wiki with having all your information there, finding what you want. So it is going to take some grassroots movement of it growing. But our data shows and other data shows it is an exponential growth where the more people you get actively working on the wiki, you're going to quickly find out that a lot of the information shows up very quickly. So it's a little discouraging for some people when they first get on to start trying to use a wiki and there's just not enough content in there and it looks like a lot of workload, but it turns out to not be that much workload, especially when you divvy up the work amongst a lot of people. We're still struggling with that even though we have 5,000 pages. Darren and James here on the task side of EVA, and they developed the wiki and put a lot of work into it. On the systems side, we still have a lot of content that's missing. We've gotten a lot of encouragement from our management where we're hoping to have what we're calling a wiki docathon in the next month, where we can just dedicate a day to where we can assign different people content to upload into the wiki. So that way, just a one day of work all together can quickly get our console handbook all uploaded, all wikified as we call it. So it is important to get that kind of help from management, but also just to help people not be discouraged by the wiki or be afraid of it. It's good to have the community of everybody helping. So.
We actually started with our 2-year proficiency cycle back when it was 2 years, and we just decided, well, instead of just reading it, why don't we read it and copy it into the wiki, and just started slowly building it from there. And now our management uses the wiki for our quarterly proficiency cycle.
And you really see it, unfortunately, you really see it take off when there's an anomaly, right? So we just had an anomaly on the fan or not just, but we had an anomaly on the fan in this EMU, and we realized that, hey, there's no page for the fan. You can, just like the EVA page, you can quickly see how quickly it developed from having no information to all of a sudden all the content from the console handbook was imported. Every AR we had on it was linked to it, so you can go look at the ARs. And all of a sudden, a week later, we now have a great page about the fan. So those are other things that work.
So how do you, well, I'm sure this is helpful. How do you control or whatever, outside databases like VMDB, ISSH, those sort of other different sort of resources that are actually outside of our specific control, but we might reference certain items, and somehow or another you have to go ensure that you've got the latest version of a drawing or a publication or something like that. That's something we learn later on, or.
So we have features that are built in. They mentioned them earlier as far as linking to IMS and to drawings and to photos on I/O, and we'll talk about those in tutorials and as far as building pages of how you can link that data easily.
We're working with other admins and other databases. So for example, that's a good point. We were referencing a document in the engineering world that has our requirements. The way they were putting it on their server was basically by date. So if we reference that date, we might be outdated when they update it. So by making them aware of that, they've kind of maybe transitioned to a new concept to where they put it on a location where we can easily just point to a folder that has the latest version versus the actual document. So there's still times like that we have to tweak it, and that just involves us, the admins throughout the different wikis, working with different people in other organizations. We're trying to get access into the flight rule database to where we can easily query the flight rule database and get the latest flight rule versus pointing to a specific link. So a lot of that stuff just takes some of the background work that you might see the admins taking care of.
Well, thank you everyone for your time.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank y'all for coming and
Thank you.
presenting.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.